Story 1. I wasn't supposed to take that road, but my GPS insisted it was the fastest route. I've been driving trucks for almost 11 years now. Long hauls, night shifts, empty highways. It's all routine to me. You learn to trust certain things out here. Your instincts, your mirrors, and most of all, your route. That night started like any other. I was hauling a sealed load across state lines. Nothing unusual. The kind of job where you just keep your head down, follow the highway, and don't ask questions. It was late, somewhere past midnight, and the road was nearly empty. Just the low hum of the engine, the faint glow of the dashboard, and miles of darkness stretching ahead. Around 1:30 a.m., my GPS flickered. I didn't think much of it at first. Signal drops happen all the time in remote areas, but then it recalculated and suggested a new route, said it would save me 23 minutes. That's the kind of thing you don't ignore on a long haul. The turn was coming up fast, a narrow exit I didn't recognize, no highway sign, just a small reflective marker, half hidden in the dark. I hesitated for a second, then took it. That's when things started to feel off. The road was too quiet, not empty, quiet, like the kind of silence that feels heavy. My headlights stretched out ahead, but they didn't seem to reach as far as they should. The asphalt looked older, rougher, like it hadn't been maintained in years. I checked my mirrors, nothing behind me, no headlights, no taillights, just darkness. About 5 minutes in, I passed a mile marker, mile 17. Didn't think much of it at the time, but then a few minutes later, I saw another one, mile 17. Same number, same shape, same dent on the corner. I slowed down a little, trying to make sense of it. Maybe I missed something. Maybe there was a loop or a split in the road I didn't notice. But there wasn't, just one straight road stretching forward. I reached for my phone, no signal. That's when the GPS spoke again. Continue straight for 42 miles. The voice sounded normal, calm, but something about the timing felt wrong, like it waited for me to notice the marker before saying anything. I kept driving. A few minutes later, I saw it again. Mile 17. This time, I know I didn't imagine it. I started paying closer attention to everything. The road, the trees, the edges of the asphalt. And that's when I noticed something else. The trees weren't changing, not just similar, identical. Same bends in the branches, same gaps, same shadows falling across the road, like I was passing the same stretch over and over again. I checked the clock, 1:47 a.m. I remember that clearly because after what felt like another 10, maybe 15 minutes of driving, I checked again, 1:47 a.m. That's when I felt it. Not fear, not yet, just awareness. Like something wasn't just wrong, it was watching. I adjusted in my seat and turned the radio on. Static filled the cab, low and constant. I flipped through channels, but all I got was the same empty noise. Then, for just a second, a voice cut through. You weren't supposed to turn. I froze. The signal snapped back to static immediately after. No repeat, no confirmation, just silence again. I told myself it was interference, cross-channel bleed, anything but what it sounded like. But I didn't turn the radio off. I didn't want to hear the quiet again. Up ahead, I finally saw something different, a shape on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was a sign, maybe a rest stop or a warning marker, but as I got closer, I realized it was a person, standing still, facing the road, no movement, no attempt to wave me down, just standing there. Now, I've seen hitchhikers before, it's not unusual, but something about this felt wrong. The way they stood, too straight, too still. I slowed down slightly as I passed, and I made the mistake of looking. Their face, I can't describe it properly, not because I don't remember, but because it didn't feel complete, like something was missing. I looked away immediately and kept driving, my hands tighter on the wheel now. I checked the mirrors, nothing. They were gone. No fading figure, no movement, just empty road behind me again. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself. Then I saw the mile marker, mile 17, again. At that point, I knew this wasn't a normal road. I pressed the accelerator a little harder, not speeding, just enough to feel like I was doing something. The GPS remained silent now, no directions, no updates, just the faint glow of the screen showing a straight line that didn't seem to end. Then the radio came back, clear this time. "You missed the exit." My stomach dropped. "I didn't see an exit," I said out loud before I could stop myself. There was a pause, then, "You already passed it." The voice wasn't distorted anymore. It sounded calm, almost patient. I looked ahead, and that's when I saw it. A break in the road. Not an exit, not exactly, just a gap in the darkness, like the road split for a moment, and something else existed beyond it. No sign, no marking, just an opening. I slowed down as I approached. The headlights barely reached into it, but I could see enough to know it wasn't a road. It looked like the same highway I had been on before, the real one. I didn't question it. I turned the wheel. As soon as the truck crossed that line, everything changed. The air felt lighter. The engine sounded normal again, and in my mirrors, headlights, other cars, movement. I pulled over about a mile down, hands still gripping the wheel. I checked my clock, 2:03 a.m. Time had moved again. I grabbed my logbook to document the route, but something didn't make sense. According to my records, I had never left the original highway. No detour, no alternate road, just a straight, uninterrupted route. I sat there for a long time, trying to process it. Eventually, I got back on the road and finished the delivery. Didn't mention it to anyone. Didn't report the GPS issue. Out here, you learn not to. But a few nights later, I was reviewing my dashcam footage, just out of curiosity. The entire route was there, clear, normal. No strange road, no repeated mile markers, no person standing on the side, just highway, except for one thing. At exactly 1:47 a.m., the footage froze, and for a single frame, just one, there was something in the passenger seat, not moving, not clear enough to make out, but definitely not empty. If this video already feels off, like it, consider subscribing to the channel and stay with me. It only gets darker from here. Story 2. It didn't bother me the first time I saw him, because out on these roads, seeing someone walking alone at night isn't unusual. I've been driving long hauls for years, and you get used to strange sights, people hitchhiking, broken down cars, silhouettes in the distance. But this was different. The first time, it was exactly 2:17 a.m. I remember because I had just checked the clock after finishing my coffee. He was standing on the side of the highway, just inside the reach of my headlights, not waving, not moving, just watching the road like he was waiting for something specific. I drove past him without slowing down, barely giving it a second thought, but something about the way he stood stayed with me longer than it should have. The next night, I was on a completely different route, a different state, different highway, and at exactly 2:17 a.m., I saw him again. Same posture, same stillness, same feeling like he wasn't really there for help. That's when I started paying attention. I checked the time more often. I made sure to notice my surroundings. And every night after that, no matter where I was, no matter what route I took, at exactly 2:17 a.m., he would appear on the side of the road, always facing forward, always still, always watching. At first I told myself it was coincidence, maybe my brain filling in patterns where there weren't any. But then I started noticing changes, small ones at first. The distance between us when I passed him got shorter. The first few nights, he was far off the shoulder, then closer, then right at the edge of the road. It was gradual, subtle enough that I almost didn't catch it. But once I did, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started gripping the wheel tighter around that time every night, slowing down just enough to see him clearly, without admitting to myself that I was looking for him. One night, I decided to test it. I slowed down more than usual, just enough to really look at him as I passed. His face was wrong, not distorted, not damaged, just incomplete somehow. Like my mind couldn't fully process what I was seeing. And then I noticed something else. His head turned slightly as I drove by, following me, Not quickly, not unnaturally, just enough to confirm he was aware of me. That was the first time I felt it. Not fear exactly, but the certainty that this wasn't random. The next night, I kept driving past 217. No one on the road. I almost felt relieved until I checked the clock again. It still read 2:16. It stayed there longer than it should have. Long enough for me to realize something wasn't right. And then, without warning, it switched to 2:17. I looked up, and he was already there. Not ahead of me this time, beside the truck, close enough that I didn't see him approach. Just suddenly there, standing near the edge of the lane, close enough that I could have reached him if I opened the door. I didn't slow down that time. I didn't look for long, but in my side mirror, he was still there, not getting smaller, not fading into the distance, just staying in the same position relative to the truck, like he was moving with me without actually walking. I pressed the accelerator without thinking, heart steady but heavy, like I already understood something I didn't want to accept. Eventually, he was gone, just gone, like he had never been there. After that, I tried everything to avoid him, different routes, different schedules, even stopping early to avoid being on the road at that time, but it didn't matter. If I was driving, if I was on any road at all, at 2:17 a.m., he would appear, and each time, he was closer. The last time I saw him, I didn't even check the clock. I didn't need to. I felt it before I saw anything, that same heavy silence pressing in around the truck. I kept my eyes on the road, refusing to look to the side, refusing to acknowledge it. But then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The passenger seat wasn't empty anymore. I turned slowly, just enough to see. He was sitting there, not looking at me, just facing forward, exactly the way he stood on the road, still, silent. And when I finally forced myself to check the clock, it read 2:17 a.m. It hasn't changed since. Story 3. The first thing they told me about that route was simple. Don't stop. No matter what you see, no matter what happens, you keep driving. At the time, I thought it was just another one of those exaggerated warnings drivers pass around, like ghost stories meant to keep you alert during long shifts. I'd heard plenty of them before, and none of them ever turned out to be real. So when dispatch assigned me that highway, I didn't think twice. It was just another job, another overnight haul, through a stretch of road I hadn't driven before. The highway itself didn't seem unusual at first. Long, empty, surrounded by nothing but darkness and occasional patches of trees. No towns, no exits for miles, just a straight line cutting through the middle of nowhere. The kind of road that makes time feel slower. Around an hour in, I remembered the warning again, mostly because of how quiet everything felt. Not just the absence of other cars, but the lack of any sound beyond the truck itself. Even the usual background noise seemed muted. That's when I saw the first thing that made me consider stopping. A car on the side of the road, hazard lights blinking faintly. It wasn't unusual, but something about the way it sat there felt staged, like it had been placed rather than left. I slowed down slightly, instinct kicking in, but then I remembered the rule. Don't stop. I kept going. As I passed, I glanced over. The driver's door was open, no one inside. A few miles later, I saw another one. Same model, same position, same blinking lights. That's when it stopped feeling like coincidence. I checked my mirrors, nothing behind me, no signs that I had passed the same spot twice, but the car was identical. Even the dent on the rear bumper matched. I tightened my grip on the wheel and kept driving. Then the radio came on. Not static, clear, a voice, calm and low. You should have stopped. I froze for a second, waiting for it to continue, but it didn't. Just silence again. I reached for the dial, but before I touched it, the voice spoke again. You still can. I looked ahead, and that's when I saw something in the middle of the road. A person, sitting, not moving, right in my lane. I slowed down instinctively, heart steady but heavy, like I already knew this was part of it. The warning came back to me, clearer this time. Don't stop. I eased the truck to the side, just enough to avoid them without fully stopping. As I passed, I looked down. They were looking straight up at me, smiling. I pressed the accelerator after that, not fast, just enough to keep moving. The road stretched on, unchanged, but the feeling didn't go away. It stayed with me, like something had noticed I didn't follow instructions. A few minutes later, I saw headlights in my mirrors. Finally, another vehicle. Relief hit me almost immediately, but it didn't last. The headlights didn't get closer, didn't fall back, just stayed there, perfectly aligned with my truck, no matter how fast or slow I went. Then the radio came back. You stopped. I shook my head, speaking out loud without thinking. No, I didn't. There was a pause. Then, you will. Up ahead, the road changed, not visibly at first, but something about it felt narrower, the darkness thicker, and then I saw it, a line of cars, all stopped, blocking the highway completely. No movement, no hazard lights, just still vehicles stretching across both lanes. I slowed down, not by choice this time, but because there was no way around them. And as the truck came closer to a complete stop, I understood why they told me not to. Story 4. I didn't even realize the radio was on at first, because I don't remember turning it on. 1 minute the cab was quiet, just the steady hum of the engine and the tires against the road. And the next there was a faint voice under the static, like it had already been speaking before I noticed it. I've driven enough nights to know how radio interference works. Signals overlap, voices cut in and out. But this didn't sound like that. It sounded clear, too clear, calm and steady, almost like someone sitting in the passenger seat, speaking just loud enough to be heard without trying. You're ahead of schedule. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard, 1:52 a.m., and I knew that wasn't right. I wasn't ahead of anything. If anything, I was running a little late. I reached over and turned the dial, expecting static or another station, but the voice didn't change. It stayed right there, same tone, same volume, like the radio wasn't what was producing it. You took the turn earlier than expected. My hand paused. I hadn't taken any turns, just a straight highway for the past hour. I looked ahead, then checked my mirrors out of habit. Nothing unusual. Empty road behind me. No headlights. No signs of anyone else around. I told myself it was just a coincidence, maybe some broken signal I was picking up, but the way the voice spoke felt specific, like it wasn't meant for anyone else. I turned the radio off, but the voice didn't stop. That won't make a difference. This time it didn't feel like it was coming from the speakers at all. It felt closer, like it was inside the cab somewhere I couldn't place. I reached for the volume and turned it all the way down, and the sound stopped, but it didn't feel like silence. It felt like something had chosen not to speak. For the next few miles, everything seemed normal again. The road stretched out ahead, dark and empty, just the way I preferred it, and I focused on driving, letting the rhythm settle my thoughts, convincing myself it was nothing, just fatigue, just the kind of thing your mind does when you've been alone too long. Then the radio clicked back on. I didn't touch it. Slow down. The voice was clearer now, not louder, just more present. I looked at the speedometer. I wasn't going fast, still. Something about the way it said it made me ease off the accelerator without thinking. A few seconds later, I saw why. Up ahead, barely visible at first, something was stretched across part of the road, not enough to block it completely, but enough that if I hadn't slowed down, I would have hit it. It looked like debris, twisted metal scattered just enough to cause damage if you weren't paying attention. I steered around it carefully, my grip tightening slightly on the wheel. I didn't thank the voice, I didn't acknowledge it, but I didn't turn the radio off again. You're adjusting faster now. I frowned slightly, my focus sharpening. What is this? I said quietly. There was a pause, just long enough to feel deliberate. Guidance. The word sat there, simple, like it didn't need explanation. I glanced at the GPS, still showing a straight route, no warnings, no changes. Next curve, reduce speed. I looked ahead. The road looked straight. No sign of a turn, nothing that suggested I needed to slow down. I almost ignored it, but something stopped me. Not fear, not trust, just the memory of what had happened a minute ago. I eased off the accelerator again. The curve appeared suddenly, hidden just beyond a dip in the road I hadn't noticed before. If I had kept my speed, I would have had to brake hard. Instead, I took it smoothly. This time, I didn't question it. I just kept driving. For several minutes, the voice continued. Small instructions, minor adjustments, each followed by something that justified it. A dip, a patch of uneven road, something subtle but real. It wasn't dramatic, it was precise, controlled, and then it changed. Do not look to your right. That one felt different, not a suggestion, something firmer. I kept my eyes forward, but the thought settled immediately. Why not? There was nothing on the right side of the road, just darkness. But the more I drove, the more aware I became of it, the absence of detail, the way my peripheral vision kept pulling toward it, maintained forward focus. My grip tightened slightly. I wasn't scared, but I was aware in a way that made everything feel sharper. The road, the air, the space around me. And the longer I didn't look, the harder it became not to. Eventually, I made a mistake. Just a quick glance, less than a second, but enough. There was something there, not on the road, not standing, just present, close enough that it should have been visible the entire time, but it hadn't been. And the moment I saw it, I understood why. I told you not to. The voice didn't sound calm anymore. I snapped my eyes back to the road. What was that? I asked quietly, but there was no answer. The radio went silent again. I kept driving, not checking the mirrors, not looking anywhere except straight ahead. After a while, the GPS flickered once, then returned to normal. I glanced at it, and something was off. The route line wasn't straight anymore. It curved slightly, suggesting a turn that didn't exist on the road in front of me. "You're off course," the voice returned, but this time it didn't sound like it was helping. I looked ahead. The road was still straight, empty, unchanged. "You shouldn't have looked." I didn't respond. I didn't slow down. I just kept driving. And for the rest of that night, the voice didn't guide me anymore. It just kept talking. Story 5. I was told not to open the trailer under any circumstances, which in this job isn't as unusual as it sounds. Sealed loads, restricted cargo, vague paperwork, you get used to it. But this one felt different from the start. The instruction wasn't just written once, it was repeated. Dispatch mentioned it twice on the call. It showed up again in the confirmation message. And right before I picked up the load, I got one last reminder. Do not open the trailer. No explanation, no context, just that. The pickup location was a warehouse I'd never been to before, far enough off the main road that the GPS almost lost it. No signage, no activity, just a single building with one dim light above a loading bay. I backed the truck into position and waited, expecting someone to come out, but no one did. After a minute, the bay door opened slowly on its own, just enough for me to reverse in. Inside, it was darker than it should have been. Not completely dark, but dim enough that the edges of the space felt unclear. I stayed in the cab, waiting for instructions, but nothing came. No workers, no voices, no movement, just that same heavy quiet. Then I heard it, a sound from inside the trailer, not loud, just a faint shift, like something settling. I told myself it was cargo being loaded, even though I hadn't seen anyone actually load it. A few minutes later, the trailer door shut behind me, with a solid, final sound that echoed longer than it should have. My phone buzzed right after. A message, load secured, proceed to destination. No signature, no confirmation process, just that. I didn't question it. I've learned not to. The drive started normally. The highway was empty, the route straightforward, and for the first hour, everything felt exactly the way it should. But somewhere into the second hour, I heard it again, that same sound, clearer this time, not just a shift, something more deliberate, like movement. I adjusted in my seat and listened. Cargo shifts sometimes, but this didn't sound random. It had a pattern, a pause, then a slight movement, then stillness again. I checked the mirrors out of habit, even though I knew I wouldn't see inside. Everything looked normal. The trailer was closed, sealed, exactly how it should be. Another sound, slightly louder. I turned the radio on just to break the silence, but even with the static, I could still hear it underneath. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the road, but the longer I drove, the more frequent the sounds became. Not constant, just enough to make it impossible to forget. At one point, I considered pulling over, not to open the trailer, just to check the outside, make sure everything was secure. I slowed slightly, scanning for a spot, but then I remembered the instruction, not just what it said, but how it was said. I kept driving. Another hour passed, and then the sound stopped completely. The silence that followed was worse, because now I was waiting for it. Every second felt like it was building towards something. Then the radio clicked. Not static this time, clear. "You should check it." I didn't respond, didn't move. The voice wasn't familiar, just calm and neutral. "It's not secured properly." My grip tightened slightly. "It's fine," I said quietly. A pause. "It's trying to get out." I turned the radio off immediately. The sound came back, louder this time. A thud, then another, then a slow dragging noise, like something moving against the inside wall. I felt it through the seat, not strong enough to shake the truck, but enough to confirm it was real. I pressed the accelerator slightly, not speeding, just enough to feel like I was moving away from it. The sounds didn't match my speed. They continued at their own pace. Thud, pause, drag. I kept my eyes forward, forcing myself not to check too often, but every time I glanced at the mirrors, something felt different, not visibly. The trailer looked the same, but the feeling had changed. It didn't feel like it was behind me anymore. It felt closer. Then suddenly, everything stopped again. No sound, no movement, just the road. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself, telling myself it was over, that whatever it was had settled. That's when I noticed the seal. The metal latch on the trailer door was open. I hadn't seen it open, hadn't felt anything change, but it wasn't secured anymore. I stared at it through the mirror, trying to convince myself it had always been that way. Then the door shifted, just slightly, not swinging open, just enough to create a narrow gap. It was dark inside, darker than it should have been. And from that gap, something moved, not fully visible, not clear enough to describe, but enough to know it wasn't cargo. And the way it moved, it wasn't trying to get out anymore. It had already found a way. Story 6. I don't usually stop at way stations unless I have to, but that night I didn't really get a choice. The sign appeared out of nowhere. Way station open, all trucks must enter. Lit just enough to stand out against the darkness, even though I hadn't seen another vehicle for miles. It wasn't unusual for stations to run at odd hours, so I eased off the accelerator and followed the ramp without thinking too much about it. As I pulled in, the first thing I noticed was how empty it felt. Not quiet, empty. Usually, even at night, there's something. Another truck idling, a light in the office, but this place looked like it had been left running without anyone actually there. The overhead lights cast a dull yellow glow across the concrete, and the digital display above the scale flickered slightly, like it had been on too long. No other trucks, no staff, no movement. I slowed as I approached the scale and rolled forward until the truck settled into place, waiting for instructions, but nothing came. No voice, no signal, just the faint hum of the engine and the lights above me. Then the display turned on. Numbers flickered, adjusting rapidly before stabilizing, which was normal, but then the screen changed. Instead of clearing me forward, it showed a message: second vehicle detected. I frowned and checked my mirrors out of instinct. The road behind me was empty. No headlights, no sign of another truck entering. I waited, expecting it to correct itself. Maybe a glitch, but the message stayed there, steady and bright. I leaned forward slightly, scanning the area again. Still nothing. Then the speaker crackled. Proceed. The The voice sounded flat, mechanical, but slightly delayed, like it had taken too long to decide what to say. I hesitated for a moment, then eased the truck forward off the scale, following the exit lane. As I passed the small booth, I glanced toward it. Empty. Chair pushed in, screen still on, no one inside. I kept driving and merged back onto the highway, checking my mirrors again. Still nothing behind me, just the same empty road stretching out into darkness. A few minutes later, the radio turned on by itself. You didn't stop long enough. I reached over and turned it off immediately, but the silence that followed didn't feel the same. It felt like something had just paused. I kept driving, focusing on the road ahead. 5 minutes passed, then 10, and nothing changed. No cars, no lights, no movement. That's when I checked the clock. It hadn't moved, still showing the same time as when I entered the way station. I stared at it for a moment, then looked back at the road. Everything else felt normal. The engine, the motion, but the time wasn't right. Then the radio clicked again. "Ah, you were supposed to wait." I didn't respond, didn't slow down, just kept driving. Then I saw another sign. Same wording, same dim light, another way station ahead. That didn't make sense. There shouldn't be another one this close. I checked the GPS, still showing a straight route, no stops. The sign passed overhead, and before I could think about it too much, I turned. The ramp looked exactly the same curve, same lighting, same empty feeling. I drove onto the scale again, slower this time, waiting. The display stayed dark for a few seconds longer than before, then flickered on. Numbers appeared, shifting, adjusting, then locking into place. Then the message returned. Second vehicle, still present. My grip tightened. I checked the mirrors again, nothing behind me. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt like something was there, just not where I could see it. The speaker crackled again, slower this time. "Please remain in the vehicle." I didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there with the engine idling, eyes forward. The lights above flickered once, then again, and in that brief shift, I saw something in the mirror, not behind me, closer, near the back of the trailer. A shape, standing still, exactly where nothing had been a second ago. I didn't turn fully, didn't try to get a better look, but I understood. The system hadn't made a mistake. There had been a second vehicle. It just hadn't entered the station the way I did. The speaker came on one last time, clearer now, less mechanical. "You can leave when it does." I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't wait. I pressed the accelerator slowly and guided the truck forward, off the scale, not checking the mirrors again, not looking back toward the booth, just following the exit lane until it led me back to the highway. When I merged, I checked the clock again. It had moved, only a few minutes, like nothing had happened. I drove the rest of the route without stopping, without turning the radio on, without checking any more signs. But every now and then, I still feel it, that slight extra weight behind me, not enough to show up on a scale, but enough to know it never left. Story 7. I don't remember stopping to pick anyone up, and that's the part that still doesn't sit right with me. I've been driving long enough to know exactly when and where I stop. Fuel, rest breaks, checkpoints. It's all routine, all logged, all accounted for. That night wasn't any different, at least not at the start. The road was clear, the route was simple, and I hadn't made any unscheduled stops. I was somewhere deep into the drive, past midnight, just following the same stretch of highway I'd been on for the last hour, when I first noticed something was off. It wasn't a sound or movement, just the feeling that the cab wasn't empty anymore. At first I ignored it, assuming it was just my mind playing tricks after too much silence. But the feeling didn't fade. It sharpened, like I was becoming aware of something that had already been there. That's when I glanced to my right, and the passenger seat wasn't empty. Someone was sitting there, facing forward, posture straight, hands resting still, not moving, not looking at me, just present. I didn't react right away, not because I wasn't aware of it, but because it felt like something I had already accepted without realizing. I blinked slowly, expecting it to disappear, but it didn't, and I kept driving, hands steady on the wheel, eyes on the road, letting a few seconds pass so my mind could catch up with what I was seeing. There were no signs of forced entry, no memory of stopping, no explanation for how someone could be sitting in my truck without me noticing. "Did I pick you up?" I asked quietly, but there was no response, no movement, nothing to suggest it even heard me. I glanced again, just enough to confirm, and the details didn't make sense, not because it was dark, but because they didn't fully form, like I could see the shape but not the specifics. I looked back at the road, keeping my voice steady. "Where did you get in?" Still nothing. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt intentional, like whatever was sitting there had already decided not to answer. I checked my mirrors out of habit, expecting to see something behind me that explained it, but the road was empty. No headlights, no signs of another vehicle, just darkness stretching out behind me. I reached for the radio and turned it on, letting the static fill the cab just to break the silence. But then a voice slipped through, calm and low. "You didn't stop." I glanced at the radio, then back at the road. "I know," I said under my breath. There was a pause, then, "Are you waking? You still picked it up." I didn't respond to that, didn't look to my right again, but I could still feel it sitting there, still facing forward, still unmoving. I focused on driving, letting the rhythm of the road settle me. But something else caught my attention after a while, the reflection in the side mirror. Not behind me, inside the cab. The passenger seat was visible at the edge of the mirror, and in that reflection, it wasn't empty. That's when I knew this wasn't just in my head. I exhaled slowly and asked, "Where are you going?" Not expecting an answer, but this time I got one. "With you." The voice didn't come from the radio, and it didn't come from outside. It came from beside me, calm, flat, not directed, just stated. I didn't turn my head, didn't acknowledge it, just kept driving, eyes forward, letting the road stay the only thing that made sense. A few minutes later, I saw a rest area sign ahead, and without thinking too much about it, I took the exit. The lot was empty, the lights flickering just enough to make the shadows stretch longer than they should. I parked near the edge, turned the engine off, and let the silence settle. After a few seconds, I slowly turned my head toward the passenger seat. It was empty. No movement, no trace, nothing. I waited, listening, but the cab felt normal again, like it had before any of this started. I let out a slow breath and started the engine again, pulling back onto the highway. The rest of the drive was quiet, uneventful, no voices, no presence, nothing out of place. But later that night, when I checked my logbook, everything was accounted for. Every mile, every stop, every time stamped, except one. A recorded stop in the middle of the highway. No reason listed, no duration. Just a single entry marked at the exact time I first noticed the passenger seat wasn't empty. Story 8. I didn't notice the mile markers at first, because after a while on the road, they all start to blend together. You pass them without thinking, just numbers counting up, marking distance, giving you some sense of progress. That night was no different in the beginning. The highway was empty, the route was straight, and I was just focused on finishing the drive. It was somewhere past midnight when I started paying attention, not because I wanted to, but because something felt slightly off, like a pattern had shifted without me realizing when it started. I passed a marker that read mile 240, nothing unusual, and a few minutes later, I saw mile 239. That's when I frowned slightly, not because it was alarming, but because it didn't make sense. I had been moving forward the entire time. There were no turns, no loops, nothing that would explain the numbers decreasing. I told myself it was just a misplaced sign. Maybe maintenance hadn't updated something properly. But then I passed another one. Mile 238. I checked the GPS. The route line was still straight, unchanged. No indication that I had turned around or deviated in any way. I glanced at the mirrors, half expecting to see something behind me that explained it. But the road was empty. No headlights, no other vehicles, just darkness stretching out behind me. I kept driving, telling myself it didn't matter, that the numbers were just markers, not something that affected the road itself. But the longer I went, the more consistent it became. Mile 237, mile 236. Each one spaced exactly as it should be, each one counting backward instead of forward. I tightened my grip on the wheel slightly, not out of fear, just awareness. Something wasn't lining up. After a while, I tried to ignore it completely, focusing only on the road ahead, but then I noticed something else. The distance between the markers felt shorter, not by much, just enough that I was seeing them more often than I should. I checked the clock. Time was moving normally, or at least it looked like it was, but the frequency of the markers didn't match the time passing. I reached for the radio and turned it on, letting the static fill the cab, just to break the silence. For a moment, it worked. Then a voice slipped through. "You're going the wrong way." I glanced at the GPS again. "No, I'm not," I said quietly. The route was still straight, still correct. There was a pause. Then the voice returned. "The numbers don't lie." I didn't respond to that. I didn't turn the radio off either. I kept driving, watching the markers without meaning to. Mile 220, mile 215. The numbers were dropping faster now, not matching the distance I was covering. That's when I started to feel it. Not fear, but the sense that the road itself wasn't behaving the way it should. I pressed the accelerator slightly, testing it, watching how quickly the next marker appeared. It came sooner than expected. Mile 210. I slowed down again, trying to make sense of it, but there was no pattern I could follow, no explanation that fit. Then the radio spoke again. "You passed it already." My grip tightened. "Past what?" I asked, before I could stop myself. There was a pause then. The exit. I looked ahead. The road was empty. No signs, no turnoffs, nothing that suggested I had missed anything. Then I saw mile 200 and something changed. The air felt heavier, like the space around the truck had shifted slightly. The darkness ahead looked thicker, less like an absence of light, and more like something that filled the road itself. I kept driving, steady, controlled, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. The numbers kept dropping. Mile 190, mile 180. Faster now, too fast. I checked the GPS again, and this time something was different. The route line was still there, but the distance indicator was decreasing, not counting down to my destination, but counting down to something else, a number I hadn't noticed before. 50 miles, then 49, then 48, and it was dropping faster than it should have been. "You're getting closer," the voice said. I didn't respond, didn't look away from the road, just kept driving. Mile 150, mile 120, mile 90. The markers were coming too quickly now, barely spaced out, like the road was compressing, folding in on itself. The truck felt the same, the speed unchanged, but the distance didn't behave normally anymore. I exhaled slowly, trying to stay focused, trying to keep everything steady. Then I saw mile 50. At the same moment, the GPS number hit 0. The screen flickered once, then went blank for a second before returning to normal. Except now there was no route, no destination, just an empty line. "This is where it ends." The voice was clearer now, closer. I looked ahead. There was no road, not in the way there should have been. It didn't drop off, didn't break. It just stopped existing beyond a certain point, like the darkness had taken its place. I slowed down, not braking hard, just enough to feel the change. My headlights reached forward, but they didn't reflect off anything past a certain distance, like there was nothing there to reflect off of. Then I noticed something else, a sign, standing at the edge of where the road ended, mile 0. I didn't stop completely, didn't get out. I just sat there, engine idling, staring at it, trying to understand what I was looking at. Then the radio came back one last time. "You can turn around now." I didn't question it. I didn't wait. I slowly turned the wheel, guiding the truck back the way I had come. As soon as I did, something shifted. Not dramatically, just enough to feel like the road had returned to something normal. I drove for a few minutes before checking the markers again. Mile 241, then 242, counting forward, exactly the way they should. I didn't stop for the rest of the drive, didn't turn the radio on, didn't check the GPS again. But later, when I reviewed my route log, something didn't make sense. There was no record of mile 0, no indication I had ever reached the end of anything, just a continuous route, as if I had never turned around at all. Story 9. I don't remember that rest stop being there before, and that's what bothered me the most. I've driven that route enough times to know exactly where everything is. The exits, the gas stations, the long empty stretches where there's nothing for miles. But that night, sometime after 2 a.m., I saw a sign I had never seen before. Rest area, -1 mile. It wasn't unusual on its own, but the placement felt wrong, like it didn't belong to that stretch of highway. I kept driving, trying to recall if I had just missed it on previous runs, but the more I thought about it, the more certain I became that it hadn't been there. Still, I didn't question it too much. Long drives blur things together. Maybe I just never needed to stop there before. A mile later, the exit appeared exactly where the sign said it would. The ramp curved off the highway, dimly lit, leading down into a small rest area surrounded by darkness. No buildings I recognized, no vending machines glowing in the distance, just a parking lot with a few overhead lights flickering slightly. I slowed down and took the exit, more out of habit than anything else. Sometimes it's easier to stop for a few minutes, stretch, reset, then keep going. As I pulled in, I noticed how empty it was. Not just no cars, no signs that there had been cars at all. The pavement looked untouched, like nothing had driven over it in a long time. I parked near one of the lights and turned off the engine, letting the silence settle around me. For a moment, everything felt normal. Just another stop, another quiet break in the drive. I leaned back slightly, closing my eyes for a second, letting the stillness take over. Then I noticed something. The lights weren't steady. They flickered, not randomly, but in a pattern, dimming and brightening in slow intervals, like they were trying to maintain something that wasn't quite working. I opened my eyes fully and looked around. The lot hadn't changed, but it didn't feel the same anymore. The edges of it, where the light faded into darkness, seemed farther away than they should have been. I stepped out of the truck, more out of instinct than curiosity. The air felt heavier, not colder, just thicker, like the space itself was different from the highway I had just left. I stretched, glanced around again, and that's when I noticed the building. It hadn't been there when I pulled in. A small structure near the far edge of the lot, barely visible under a flickering light. I was sure it hadn't been there a moment ago. I would have seen it. It wasn't large, just a simple rest stop building, but something about it felt delayed, like it had appeared a second too late. I didn't walk toward it. I just stood there, watching, waiting to see if it would change again. It didn't. It just stayed there, silent, still, like it had always been part of the place. I shook it off and turned back toward the truck. That's when I saw it. Another truck, parked a few spaces away. I hadn't heard it arrive. No engine, no headlights, nothing. It was just there. I frowned slightly, trying to remember if it had been there when I pulled in, but I couldn't. The angle felt wrong, like it hadn't been part of the scene until I noticed it. I climbed back into my truck, without thinking too much about it. Started the engine. The familiar sound helped settle things slightly. I glanced once more toward the other truck. Still there. No movement, no driver, just parked under the light. I shifted into gear and began to pull forward, heading back toward the exit. As I passed the other truck, I looked over, just for a second. The driver's seat was occupied. Someone was sitting there, facing forward, completely still. I didn't see them move, didn't see them turn, but I knew they were there. I didn't slow down, I didn't stop. I just kept driving toward the exit ramp. The lights flickered again as I passed under them, dimming slightly before returning to normal. The highway came back into view ahead, exactly where it should have been. I merged back onto the road and kept going, not looking back, not checking the mirrors, just focusing on the drive. After a few minutes, everything felt normal again. The road, the air, the silence. It all returned to the way it had been before I stopped. But then I checked the clock. It hadn't changed, still showing the same time as when I took the exit. I frowned slightly, trying to remember how long I had been stopped, but it didn't make sense. It should have moved, even a few minutes, but it hadn't. I drove on, letting it go, telling myself it was just a glitch, just something small I didn't need to think about. Later that night, after I finished the route, I checked my logs. Every mile, every stop, everything was recorded the way it should be. Except there was no record of that rest stop, no entry, no exit, no pause in the route. Just a continuous drive along the highway, like I had never left it at all. I didn't think much of it after that, at least not right away. But a few nights later, I was on the same route again, same time, same stretch of road, and I slowed down without realizing it, looking for the sign. Rest area, -1 mile. It wasn't there. The road stayed empty, unchanged, exactly the way I remembered it before that night. I kept driving, and for a moment I felt relieved until I checked my mirror and saw my truck still parked under those flickering lights. Story 10. I wasn't scheduled for that delivery, and that's what made it feel wrong from the start. The request came in late, well past midnight, through a dispatch channel I didn't recognize. No prior notice, no standard paperwork, just a location, a pickup code, and a delivery point that didn't show up properly on my GPS. Normally, I would have ignored something like that, but the message had already been logged under my route, like it had always been there. When I checked my system again, it didn't look out of place anymore. It looked like part of the job. The pickup point was a small yard just off a service road, surrounded by nothing but fencing and darkness. No signage, no activity, just a gate that opened automatically as I approached, like it was expecting me. I drove in slowly, headlights cutting across rows of empty trailers lined up in perfect order. No workers, no movement, no sound beyond the engine. I parked where the instructions told me to and waited, expecting someone to come out, but no one did. After a minute, my phone buzzed. Trailer assigned, connect and depart. I looked ahead, and one of the trailers wasn't there before. I'm sure of that. The space had been empty when I pulled in, but now it was occupied. I stepped out, walked toward it, checking the number against the one in the message. It matched. The trailer looked normal at a distance, but as I got closer, something felt off. No company branding, no markings, just a plain surface that didn't reflect light the way it should. I didn't spend long thinking about it. I hooked it up, checked the connection, and got back in the truck. As soon as I closed the door, my phone buzzed again. Proceed immediately. No signature, no confirmation, just that. The drive started quietly. The road was empty, the route simple, and for the first hour, nothing stood out. But then I noticed something strange. The weight felt inconsistent. Not heavy, not light, just shifting. Subtle enough that it didn't affect control, but enough that I could feel it through the seat. I checked the mirrors. The trailer looked stable. No swaying, no visible movement. Still, the sensation didn't match what I was seeing. I turned on the radio to break the silence, but instead of static, I got a voice immediately. "You're not the first." I froze for a second, then glanced at the radio. No channel indicator, no signal marker, just that voice, clear and steady. "What?" I said quietly. There was a pause then. "You won't be the last." I turned the radio off. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. A few minutes later, I saw headlights behind me. Finally, another vehicle. They stayed at a distance, not getting closer, not falling back, just there. I kept driving, occasionally checking the mirrors. Something about the spacing felt wrong, like they were matching me too precisely. Then I noticed something else. The reflection, not from the road, but from the trailer. The surface wasn't reflecting the headlights properly. It was dull, absorbing the light instead of bouncing it back. The radio clicked again. "Don't stop." I hadn't planned to, but now the thought was there. I kept driving. The headlights behind me stayed consistent, but after a while, I realized something didn't make sense. They weren't behind me anymore. They were aligned with the trailer, not following the truck, but positioned where the trailer should have been casting shadow. I frowned, adjusting my mirror slightly, trying to get a better look, but the angle didn't help. The lights didn't behave the way they should. Then the weight shifted again, stronger this time, enough that I felt it clearly through the seat. I tightened my grip on the wheel. "Almost there," the voice said. I didn't ask where there was. I didn't respond at all. I just kept driving. Eventually, the GPS flickered, then updated. A new route appeared, a turn I hadn't seen before, leading off the main highway onto a narrow road that didn't look like it was meant for trucks. I slowed slightly as I approached it, hesitating for a moment, but then the radio spoke again. "This is your stop." I turned. The road narrowed immediately, trees closing in on both sides, blocking out what little light there was. The headlights barely reached ahead, and the air felt heavier the further I went. After a few minutes, I saw it. A structure at the end of the road, barely visible, like it wasn't fully there until you got close enough. No lights, no markings, just a shape waiting in the darkness. I stopped the truck. The engine idled quietly. No instructions came, no messages, just silence. Then my phone buzzed. Unload complete. I stared at the screen. I hadn't gotten out. I hadn't opened the trailer. I hadn't done anything. Slowly, I checked the mirrors. The trailer was gone. No detachment sound. No movement. Just empty space behind me. I didn't get out to check. I didn't try to understand it. I just turned the truck around and drove back the way I came. The road felt shorter on the way out, the trees less dense, the air lighter. And when I reached the highway again, everything looked normal. The GPS returned to the original route. The radio stayed silent. The weight was gone. Later, when I reviewed my logs, the delivery was there, fully recorded, pickup confirmed, delivery completed, route verified. Everything looked legitimate, except for one detail, the trailer ID. When I searched for it in the system, it didn't exist. Story 11. I saw my own truck on the road before I ever got there, and that's not something you can explain away easily. I've been driving long enough to recognize every detail of my rig. The small scratch near the side mirror, the way the left headlight sits slightly lower, even the sound the engine makes when I ease off the accelerator. So when I saw that truck ahead of me, same model, same color, same markings, I noticed it immediately. At first I didn't think much of it. There are plenty of trucks like mine out there. But something about the way it moved felt familiar, too precise, like it was matching my habits instead of just driving normally. I kept my distance, watching it as we moved down the highway. The road was empty except for us. No other vehicles, no lights, just the two trucks moving through the dark. Every time I adjusted my speed slightly, it did the same. not dramatically, just enough to stay consistent, like it was aware of me without needing to see me. I frowned slightly and checked my mirrors, half expecting to see something behind me that explained it, but there was nothing, just empty road. After a few minutes, I noticed something else. The trailer it was hauling looked exactly like mine. Same length, same condition, same small dent near the lower edge on the right side. That's when it stopped feeling like coincidence. I leaned forward slightly, focusing more carefully, trying to find something that didn't match, something that confirmed it wasn't the same truck. But the more I looked, the more it aligned. I reached for the radio, turned it on, but instead of static, I got a voice immediately. Maintain distance. I froze for a second, then glanced at the radio. No channel, no signal, just that voice. "What is that?" I said quietly, but there was no response. The truck ahead stayed steady, centered in the lane, not speeding up, not slowing down. Then, slowly, it drifted slightly to the side, just enough for me to see the driver. I wish I hadn't looked, because it was me. Not exactly, not in a way I can fully describe, but close enough that I recognized it instantly. Same posture, same hands on the wheel, same stillness. It wasn't reacting to me. It wasn't looking back. It was just driving. I pulled my eyes back to the road immediately, my grip tightening slightly. "That's not possible," I said under my breath, more to convince myself than anything else. When I looked up again, the truck had returned to the center of the lane, like nothing had happened. The radio clicked again. "Don't pass it." I hadn't planned to, but now the thought was there. I eased off the accelerator slightly, letting the distance increase, but the truck ahead adjusted too, maintaining that same gap. It didn't matter what I did. It stayed consistent. That's when I noticed the clock. It hadn't changed, still showing the same time as when I first saw the truck. I stared at it for a second, then looked back at the road. The truck was closer now. I hadn't sped up. I hadn't changed lanes, but the distance had closed. "You're getting too close." The voice sounded different this time, less calm. I pressed the brakes slightly, not enough to slow dramatically, just enough to create space. The truck ahead responded instantly, slowing just enough to keep the same distance. It wasn't reacting after me. It was reacting with me. Then the road ahead split, two lanes diverging, one leading slightly left, the other right. No signs, no markings, just a choice that hadn't been there before. The truck ahead took the left path without hesitation. The radio spoke again. Do not follow." I didn't think. I turned right. The road narrowed immediately, the trees closing in, blocking out what little light there was. I kept driving, not checking the mirrors, not looking back, just focusing on the path ahead. After a few minutes, the road straightened out again, and the feeling shifted, like something had been left behind. I checked the clock. It had moved. Time was normal again. I exhaled slowly and checked the mirrors. Empty. No truck behind me. No headlights. Nothing. I kept driving until I reached the next major highway, merging back into a route that felt familiar. Something stable. Everything seemed normal again. The road, the air, the silence. It all returned to what I expected. Later that night, I checked my logs. Everything looked fine. Route confirmed. Distance accurate. No unusual stops. But there was one detail I couldn't explain. A recorded entry. A vehicle traveling alongside me for over 40 miles. Same speed, same route, same timestamp, same ID as my own truck.